Sten, we're live.
And that was the voice of Larry the Liberty Guy, and that was the organ playing of the great John Kiley, Take Me Out to the Ball Game at Fenway Park. Thanks, Larry. Good to be back with you. Mike Stenhouse, your host on In the Dugout. Gosh, there's so much to talk about in this crazy world we have right now. Today, we're going to give you an update on the Senate floor hearing on the Transportation and Climate Initiative, or the TCI gas tax. I'll give you an update. It did pass the Senate yesterday as expected. I was curious to see what the debate would be like. I've actually got 3 or 4 minutes of video clips we want to play for you from that debate and some points we want to make. A little bit more on the outrage over Senator Whitehouse and his hypocrisy. Is he really the woke person he claims to be, or is he just another political hypocrite? Here's one for you. I'm going to show you a short clip in a bit. Brown versus black. Can you believe that some on the left are saying, well, if you're not black enough, maybe you won't experience the same racism that we claim what? And I'm not talking about Hispanic brown. I'm talking about African American brown. Wait till you hear this. To this we've come. Special guest, Claire Stottmuller is back with us. Scene 2, we'll use the operatic term. And her discussion, that great aria, the great song from the 1940s melodrama, To This We've Come, and how those words are so relevant today and how that performance is just always so beautiful. So Claire Stottmuller coming up at the bottom of the hour. And then our final segment today will be with the chairman of the Gaspee Project, Clay Johnson, and a lawyer from the Liberty Justice Center, which is based in Illinois, who actually brought a lawsuit with the Gaspee Project as a plaintiff in federal court, the First Circuit Court here in Rhode Island, about unconstitutional campaign finance laws in the state. You'll hear the story of how that law came into being, what the challenge was, and how this might make its way all the way to the United States Supreme Court. So that's our action-packed show for today. First part of it will be my commentary, and then we have those 2 special guest segments. Tomorrow, Larry the Liberty Guy on just another woke, I guess that'd be a good way to say, another woke, crazy reading list at Providence schools. I mean, disgusting, not crazy, disgusting reading list that Providence Schools has put out. And remember, Providence Schools are now run by the state. This could be a further indictment on our question yesterday. Is Commissioner Infante Green really behind all this woke critical race theory stuff that's making its way into our school districts? Well, we've got evidence of that in school districts through the curriculum, and now we're seeing it through, potentially, I imagine that's her, right? The state's running Providence Schools, and if they put out a reading list that has a lot of disgusting and that kind of material, who else? The buck's got to stop somewhere. So Larry the Liberty Guy has written an article on that. We'll discuss it. We're gonna have a pro-life update tomorrow with Barth Bracey, one of our good friends, Right to Life Rhode Island group. What's the state of the life movement policies in the state? What's still pending this year? Where do we stand? What can you do? So tune in. Barth Bracey, great guy, smart guy, and a very principled guy. We're going to have him as our guest tomorrow. And of course, on Thursdays, Dr. Andrew Boston. Next week, more critical race theory. Going to talk about something of that in a minute. We're going to have probably all of Tuesday's segment will be on some more evidence of what we're seeing in schools in the state. We'll have that pro-life update next week. Excuse me. The pro-life update is next week. Tomorrow, we're going to have Alan Waters on, the candidate. He expressed, already declared candidate against David Cicilline. We've invited David Cicilline as well, but we haven't heard from him. Tomorrow, though, we will have at least Alan Waters on Cicilline's defense of Sheldon Whitehouse's hypocrisy. Amazing. Next week also, I know I'm jumping around. I'm sorry. This is what you get when you don't have time to write out a script. We just wing it here. Is Portland, Oregon a dead city? I mean, literally a dead city that will never recover. And could Providence, Rhode Island, be on that same path? We'll talk to someone from Oregon next week. Okay, let's go into batting practice before we get into the meat of it. So I'll go with the old trusty Harvard Crimson baseball cap for now. All right. First, some good news. You might have seen, and let me share this with you, might have seen that the U.S. Supreme Court basically came down on freedom of speech rights. No, excuse me. This is the WHO. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. As we've been telling you, Dr. Boston and our show, maybe it's not appropriate for kids to be getting vaccines. Why incur some risk when doing nothing basically gives you no risk? Well, the WHO is now agreeing. Children, look it down here. Children should not be vaccinated for the moment. Not yet enough evidence, they say. Well, there is evidence that it could be harmful. Could be. We've been telling this for a long time. The CDC itself. This is the World Health Organization. The American CDC hasn't gotten to that point yet, but they're meeting today to determine if they're going to follow WHO guidance. We'll talk about that tomorrow with Dr. Boston, but I wanted you to see that. Okay, the good news from the Supreme Court is here. This is a free speech ruling where the U.S. Supreme Court, I think it was an 8-1 decision. High school cheerleader said something pretty profane, admittedly, but free speech, profane free speech is free speech. Outside of the classroom, outside of the school environment, outside of her duties as a cheerleader, just in her private life, and the school persecuted her. Supreme Court said, no, what people do in their private time, you can't hold them, try to hold them accountable for that. So that's really good news for free speech, especially with the cancel culture and the thought police that are around today. This will tie their hands just a little bit. All right, I want to spend some time talking about the TCI gas tax. So it cleared a hurdle yesterday. Don't forget, of the original 14 states that wanted to support it, only 2 are left, Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And in Rhode Island, the Senate passed it yesterday, a 28-7 vote. There were 3 Democrats that voted against it. We'll take a look at that. Well, here's the vote. Let's take a look at the vote first. And let me share this with you. So here's the final vote. And you can see those in red. Dennis Algier, Republican from South County, Jessica De La Cruz from Burrillville, Elaine Morgan from Coventry, West Warwick, South County, Gordon Rogers, all Republicans, Democrat, Lou Raptakis, Democrat, Roger Picard, and Democrat Frank Lombardi voted against it. A Republican, Tom Paolino, was apparently not present yesterday. So it's 28-7 vote with 2 abstentions or 2 non-presents. I'm going to play for you 3 short clips. Don't know if I'll play all of them, but just to get a feel for the debate on the floor. And the bill sponsor, Senator Elena DeMario, District 36, Narragansett, North Kingston, said right from this is about money. We've been told all along this is about saving the world, saving the climate, cutting carbon emissions. The whole discussion yesterday, pretty much all of it, was about money. If you want to raise money, just raise the goddamn gas tax. Don't cede power to some third-party group in Washington, D.C. who's going to raise taxes, the cost of gasoline, whenever they want, however much they want, and at the same time limit gas supplies in the state. And that money is going to go to Massachusetts instead of staying in here in our own budget. This whole thing has been a sham. This is about money under the guise of environmentalism, even though under environmentalism has no environmental impact. What they're going to do will have 0 environmental impact. We've showed that in the study we did. But right away, you can see it's about money. This first clip is from Senator Lou Raptakis, a Democrat now, from, as we mentioned, from largely the Coventry area. And I want you to, let me see now, I want to get the right one here. I've got 3 clips keyed up, and I'm not even sure which one is the right one. I think it's this one. So let's go with it.
President, I rise in support of this legislation, and I want to thank Senator DiMario.
This is not Senator Lou Raptakis, but we'll stay with this one. This is Senator Cano, and I want you to just listen and tell me if you think she understands anything she is saying here, or if she is just reading mindlessly off a list of talking points.
For putting it forward. The Teams Community Act will generate more than $20 million annually to invest in ways to help our communities with their transportation needs, and at least 35% of this process will be invested in overburdened communities that have been disproportionately impacted by transportation emissions for decades. We know we can have the biggest impact on our health outcomes as well as environmental outcomes by targeting the hottest heat areas and the biggest sources of transportation, pollution first, and the Team Community Act does that. We can prevent premature death.
Do you get the sense that this senator has any idea what she's talking about? She's just reading. And this is like they all did. If you watched the hearing yesterday, it was just what we call a word salad. They were just throwing words out there to fill time. No idea why they're supporting this bill. All they know is they've been told by their masters to support this bill. So they support the bill. This is the kind of argument that won over our Rhode Island Senate. These kinds of arguments, just mindlessly repeating talking points fed to them by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., who are just disguised as climate, environmentalists. All right, let's share the next clip. This is Lou Raptakis. Again, let me make sure I get the right one. Speaking out against the TCI
I also have
gas.
concerns that we are rushing into something that still has not been understood. And it's 14 states that probably thought this was a great idea. But what about the other 36? And now we're left with 2. We have to also think what it does to our residents. We're talking up to maybe a 38-cent gasoline per gallon tax. And say if it was implemented, and we have it, but our neighbor state, Connecticut, 2 weeks ago, shut this whole idea down. Why? What did they see that we're not seeing? When you do raise the gasoline tax, you increase it by a wider amount than your neighbors, then what it does, we're not out in Wyoming where the border state's only 400 miles away. We're 2 minutes away from Connecticut, and we're not even sure if Massachusetts is going to follow through. So that's number one. Number two, what do we do to our residents? We're just trying to come out of a pandemic, and yet we're looking on raising a commodity that many of us travel neighborhood to neighborhood or city to city or town to town just to save a few pennies here and there.
So that was Senator Lou Raptakis, conservative Democrat from the Coventry area, and he's exactly right that we're going to create such a competitive imbalance in our state. We've argued this. If the price of gasoline stays the same in Connecticut and it goes up dramatically here in Rhode Island, there's going to be a lot of people going to go to gas stations and convenience stores across the border if they're anywhere near the border, or they're going to make damn well sure they stop in Connecticut on the way through and not Rhode Island to pick up gas and other sundries. We keep self-inflicting these wounds on ourselves. And it's legislation like this why Rhode Island has one of the worst business climates and is the first in and last out of recessions. All right, one final clip. This is from Jessica De La Cruz, who makes another really good point about taxation. Senator Jessica De La Cruz.
Cruz for the second time. Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the Gaspee affair, the Boston Tea Party, all because of taxes, being overtaxed, being burdened by taxes, and that's what we're doing. And when we are discussing a regional tax, we shouldn't be the only one in the region that joins. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose of having this regional tax. The purpose of that is so that we can't escape the tax, because no matter which state we go to, we're going to be taxed. So yes, the Gaspee, Boston Tea Party, let's remember that Rhode Islanders and Americans do not like to be overtaxed. And this overtaxes people, especially the most needy in the state. So I would definitely urge against voting for this bill.
So very cogent arguments made by
Thank you,
the
Senator Dela Cruz.
conservatives in this state, Democrat or Republican, but they don't care. They just don't listen. Like I said, like we've said so many times about the woke left, their masters told them what to do. The research doesn't matter. The arguments don't matter. The votes are written in stone. They're predetermined. And sadly, the Senate passed it. Fortunately, there has been no hearing yet in the House on the related legislation. We're getting late in the session for that. But yet with this emergency fall session scheduled to decide how to spend the $1.2 billion in federal COVID relief funds, this TCI thing is going to basically be alive until that session is over. So we don't know what's going to happen. Okay, let's move on a little bit. David Cicilline. Again, great reporting by Go Local Prov on this. They're the ones who broke the Sheldon Whitehouse story. They got national and international coverage for the hypocrite he was about still defending his membership in a supposedly all-white private beach club. And today, Go Local followed up with David Cicilline, who basically defended his congressional colleague, Sheldon Whitehouse. Again, shamefully. It's just, there's no principle on the left. They claim they have principle, but there's just no principle on the left. Politics trumps everything. When they can claim they have principle and it matches with their politics, then they claim they're principled people. But when politics conflicts with principle, when you're on the liberal left, politics dominates. Very few principled people. Bernie Sanders is principled. Don't agree with much. Don't agree with anything. He's a principled guy. I don't know if he too often lets politics get in the way. He's done it, but not as much as others. But again, David Cicilline, I mean, it's just really amazing. Let's move on to the woke agenda. In Rhode Island, nationally, there is a massive backlash. The woke extremists are seeing a massive backlash to their anti-American, pro-Marxist agenda. It was a great piece in the Washington Examiner by their editor-in-chief, a guy named Hugh Gordon. And I just want to read or at least paraphrase some of the experts in that article. Hugh Gordon in the Washington Examiner says, critical race theory, today's most fashionable and pernicious orthodoxy, is about ideological re-education. We're talking about in our schools, not real education. Ideological re-education. Teaching political philosophy and activism versus teaching real educational issues. Hugh Gordon writes, not a day passes without mothers and fathers rebelling against left-wing indoctrination of their children at school. Parental anger is cracking the natural disinclination of ordinary people to speak up on controversial issues. These parents you're seeing on the news, these parents you're seeing on this show, are not normally people who would speak up and stand out, want a spotlight on them and face the wrath of the morons on the left and social media and around town. But this issue is that important. because we're talking about our kids. It's one thing to have public policy that affects our taxes and our businesses. But when you start talking about indoctrinating our kids, as Hugh Gordon writes, and you think parents are just going to sit still? I don't think so. Hugh Gordon says this is a counter-revolution that might topple the edifice of left-wing lies about our culture and our country. We've chronicled so many times on this show all the left-wing lies, deceits, and false narratives that the media perpetuates and that so many people just automatically believe. Like those senators you saw with the TCI gas tax. They have no idea what they're talking about, but they just repeat mindlessly these false narratives. The ideological abuse of school children might be a bridge too far. The fatal overreach by left-wing bullies. That's a term you're going to hear a lot today, bullies. That's what they're trying to do. It's a pressure campaign. Hugh Gordon concludes, these militants may, as a result, be thwarted in their repellent efforts to make ours a less successful and less admirable nation. They reckoned on ordinary Americans remaining docile and quiet, like those proverbial frogs in gradually heated water, but they have probably miscalculated. I can tell you, they have definitely miscalculated. A counter-revolution is underway. Grassroots parents are leading it, and we're going to keep documenting it on this show. We're going to be talking to a couple of those parents next week. So you stay with us, because in Rhode Island, parents are fighting back as well. Parents are staging that counter-revolution. I want you to go to Ocean State Car. You want to read a great article. We just had it posted minutes ago. Critical race theory in Charahoe Public Schools. We got a new contributor, Kelly Sullivan. She writes for the Charahoe Times, the Johnston paper, the Cranston paper, the Warwick paper. She's also writing now for the Ocean State Current. Check out this story on the Ocean State Current about critical race theory in Charahoe Public Schools. The two parents in that article that she wrote about, one black, one white, are going to be our guests next week, I think on Tuesday, when we have a whole day devoted to this in our schools. Now, one of those parents, you are not going to believe what you're about to see here. One of those parents, Robert Foster, has his own video blog. Now, I want you to see what one of these guests said on his show. And if this is the attitude of the larger left, God help us. So you're going to see, let me share this. You see Robert Foster in the upper left. I don't know if this is his wife, daughter, relative or not. On the right, she's not speaking in the clip you'll see. And then there's this David Gwilt from the left, who's his guest. I don't know much about this Mr. Gwilt, but listen to this abomination.
A 98% white clientele. 98%. So if this world is so racist and so awful and white supremacy runs rampant, and I'm one of a handful of black trainers in this area, why are they coming to me?
Yeah, but see, okay, so there's a couple of things. You want my opinion on it?
Of course, that's why you're here.
First of all, you're brown, you're not black, okay?
Mhm.
If you were black, like from Nigeria,
Yeah,
that might be an issue.
I got you on that.
What? If you were black, like from Nigeria? This guy, Robert Foster, I hate even saying these words, but he's not black enough. He's kind of a brown black. So he can't expect to be discriminated against. But Nigerian black can? Do you believe me now when I tell you these people are insane?
And racist, Sten. And racist. That was so offensive.
This is unbelievable. Let's do a few more seconds of this where this guy just sticks his foot in his mouth even more, believe it or not.
that, but go ahead.
Okay, if you didn't speak the English language as well as you do,
Yeah.
if you spoke more street language, maybe you wouldn't get so many people. But at the end of the day, it really depends on what your talent level is. So if people see you as a good trainer and you have a nice personality, they're going to come to see you. It doesn't matter what color you are, but you've got a talent and you.
Bingo! I mean, is this guy a friggin' moron? Excuse my French. I mean, is that a swear word? That's what Martin Luther King says. We judge you by your character, by your talents, by everything else. It doesn't matter your skin color. But yet this guy says if you are Nigerian black, then you could expect to be discriminated against, not if you're American brown black. This is today's left wing. It makes no sense. They expose themselves. The more we look at this, the more we shine the light on this, the more this kind of hypocrisy is going to come out. This is unbelievable. And I just hope, I just hope this is not, we're not going to be hearing more of this. I hope this guy is an outlier. But even that somebody can think that way, you tell me, and Larry the Liberty Guy just now, who's the real racist here? Whites with my so-called privilege, or some moron like this guy from the left? Who's the real racist here? This whole critical race theory is insulting and demeaning to blacks. That it's racist in itself, that they would assume that a whole race of people would allow themselves to be subjugated by some other race of people in modern times. Who's the racist here? My goodness. And then you saw it last night. You've probably seen, if you haven't, I'm going to play some for you. You've probably seen the, here is, Loudoun County, just like you saw in North Kingston. This is Virginia. Parents started speaking out. Parents started cheering the speakers. Not allowed to say anything at these meetings. And immediately they called a halt. They stopped the public comment of the meeting. Just like that, the fascists said, we don't like what's going on here. We don't like the comments going, so we're going to cut off the comments. We're going to cancel the parents. And they told everybody to go. Meeting's over. Public has to leave. This guy wouldn't leave. They called the police. Many wouldn't leave, and they arrested him and arrested others because they attended a public meeting that was all of a sudden turned off and ended by the fascists on that Loudoun County School Committee. What the hell is going on in our country? But we're winning, folks. They're on the run. They're exposing their hypocrisy like Sheldon Whitehouse. They're exposing their ignorance like that fellow you heard, brown, not black. They're exposing their bullying, thuggish tactics. And parents and Americans and you and me are not going to stand for it. I want you to go. I'm not going to spend much time here other than to show you because I want to get to our guests here in a few minutes. But, a new friend of ours, legalinsurrection.com, they've got a whole wonderful article on this Loudoun County event last night, which is so, it's just so perfect because it exemplifies the thuggish, out of touch views of the far left and their tactics about this meeting. It's a great article. It is, they've got all kinds of video clips here to show different aspects of the protesters, of the police coming in, shutting it down. Legalinsurrection.com, Rhode Island-based entity. We had Bill Jacobson on as a guest last week. We're going to have him on again soon. They're the ones that broke the story, if you remember, on Nicole Solis in South Kingston, that then became national news. So go to legalinsurrection.com if you want to read more. A great account about what happened last night. All right, I want to end this commentary with a final commentary, kind of similar. Juneteenth. I mentioned yesterday how, listen, on its own, that's a worthwhile cause. Celebrate the end of slavery in America. But in the political environment and because of the appeasement, obvious appeasement environment in which it was put forth as a holiday by Biden, President Biden, it just became another political nothing. I mean, that should be a legitimately important day. Beyond the significance of whether it should be a holiday or not, or the environment, do you know that according to Adam Andruski of an organization called Open the Books, that federal employees with this new paid federal holiday now have 44 days off a week. I mean, a year. 11 federal holidays now, 13 sick days, this is the average, and 20 vacation days. That's 44 days off. Many of these people make over $100,000. That's almost pretty much just a 4-day-a-week work week on average, with 44 days off. He calculated that each federal holiday costs taxpayers about $800 million to $1 billion a day in paying people for not working. We did a whole report on that a few years ago, paying union members for not working. And most federal employees are union members. Many of them are anyway. And that number doesn't even include the military and postal workers, which are calculated separately. So you're probably at about over $1 billion for each federal holiday. $100,000 for a 4-day work week for just doing an average job. No wonder why they call it Club Fed, right? Club Fed. All right, but there is a solution. This is a jest. This is a funny. But there is a solution. On Juneteenth, we can save a lot of that $1 billion if Juneteenth only becomes a day off for minorities, and that white people have to work on Juneteenth. I mean, first of all, wouldn't that be perfectly fit with the holiday? If the holiday, in today's environment is about shaming white privilege and celebrating blackness, then the white should have to work on Juneteenth. Again, this is all in jest. I'm just having fun. But this would save, so black federal employees can have the day off. Whites have to go to work. Maybe it's a form of reparation. I don't know. Kind of funny. Just thought I'd share that funny with you. We're not serious. To this we've come has been a common phrase we've been using on the show ever since we met Claire Stottmuller, who joined us again on In the Dugout. Claire, welcome back to In the Dugout, but I see that you are at the races. Looks like you're at the Kentucky Derby. What is that beautiful headpiece?
Thank you, glad to be back. It's a piece of architecture from a friend in Belgium who had a haberdashery, and as you know, I have a horse racing background and not a baseball background. So this is my hat for today.
That's in the spirit of things, and that's the most beautiful In the Dugout compliance we've seen. Okay, so you are a renowned aria singer. You're a Rhode Island resident, and to use a new terminology, you performed what we're going to call a song from a 1940s melodrama that rebuked totalitarian forms of government. The music, the text were from the 1940s. The imagery that you will soon see that Claire put together is mostly current, but the parallels between the concerns of back then, communism and other fascist governments, and what we're seeing today, back then in the 40s, is scary. Take a look at this abridged version of To This We've Come, an aria, technically for freedom, performed for our guest, who we'll talk to in just a minute, Claire Stottmuller. I had goosebumps every time. Claire, what a performance. Thanks again for doing that. You know, last time we interviewed you, we discussed your motivation behind that, and we won't repeat that. I urge you to go back and look at the prior interview we did with Claire. But Claire, you've also really studied the text of that song and really put some thought into taking certain lines from back then and equating them today. Where would you like to start? Which line do we want to pull out first?
The very first line, and I added to my research. I was helped by my Romanian friends, and I went to Florida because I take my research seriously, and I went
Yes.
as their guest. So I was with the Romanian communist survivors for 5 days in Florida. And their patriotism for America is so heartfelt because they lived through that and they escaped it. And so I had direct references from them. So when men withhold the world from men, in the case of them, I mean, one of them is a 105-year-old lady who's still 100% her brain capacity. And she told me stories, but also my friends who are about my age. And in the one case, you couldn't get your degree. This man was high ranking all through school, and his engineering degree was based on whether he was compliant with, he had been acting up. He wanted to leave the country. Just
Whether he did what the government wanted him to do or not. Right?
Exactly. Whether he would get his degree depending on that, because he'd expressed the desire to leave the country. Men withhold the world from men. Everything was withheld from them. Travel, you couldn't go to another country. Television, you got 2 hours a day. Now we get television, so many choices,
Right.
but it's all the same thing. It's all, we get told, I'm sure we've seen all the videos of each newscaster across the country saying the same thing.
Yeah, but many newscasters can't get their word out anymore. So men withhold the world from men, right?
Yes, the
Cancel culture.
censorship is holding the world from us, the world being access to life-saving drugs, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and the doctors who were saying, I've saved 400 lives with this, people who were sick. Those people were demonized because Big Pharma can't make money from cheap, been around for so long, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine.
Whatever the motive, right?
So this is withheld information from people, that life-saving information. Just a seemingly small thing, but it made my heart break. When I was driving through Manhattan, I think it was about a year ago. And of course, it's a completely different place now. The whole New York, I'm a New Yorker, is gone. It's just people with fear of the virus. I saw basketball
And crime.
closed, basketball courts locked with padlocks. And what is the youth supposed to do? They've got their hormones, they've got their energy, and it's healthy for them to go out and have camaraderie, exercise, stress release, vitamin D. Instead,
Yeah, but come on, Claire, the elites know best, right? They know what's best, what you can have and what should be withheld from you, right? So they know that. Yeah, crazy. All right, let's go on. We got a lot to cover. What's the next line you want to you want to talk about from the
we can revisit the choice that that there is the
No
choice,
chance
that
for
there is no
choice.
choice, chance for choice. And so with my Romanian friends, as I started, choice of electricity, I mean, that was a few hours a day. You couldn't, there were no parties to choose from except for Marx or Engels. Yoga, you weren't allowed to study or take yoga, that was forbidden. Food was rationed, so there's not choice there. And I'll say that now, it was really frightening to see images this year of stores that were open, like a big, I don't know, Walmart or something, a big store open, but the section for seeds partitioned off. A person couldn't buy seeds. What is this that a person can't have? Oh, because we have to be dependent on whatever they are going to give us. What happened to independence, to grow one's own food, to be self-sufficient, to be employed, to have one's business so that one is self-sufficient? No, we have to be relying on them. And that's not choice. The choice of whether we're going to have oxygen or not, to go into a store with or without oxygen.
Asks,
Or
yeah.
the choice of children to be at school with oxygen. There's no choice there. Now with the travel, whether you've had the vaccine or haven't had it, which is all confused now because airlines were saying internationally can't travel without it. But now they're changing their tune because so many people have had blood clots while traveling, causing expensive landings. So now they're saying, if you've had the jab, you can't travel. So
Yeah.
you're caught between a rock and a hard
All
place.
right. I think my favorite line, and I know we talked about this last time, but I want to just get some more thoughts from you on it. If to men, not to God, we now must pray. Government and the institutions that are aligned with big government, whether it's big pharma, big tech, whatever, those are now the idols, the false idols that big government wants us to worship, not God. Agree?
Yes, and the ideas of God are being taken away and replaced with these new ideas, such as God made man in his own image, man and woman, he created them. But now a child is born, and in school, not by their parents, but in school, they're told, oh, but you can choose. Maybe you don't want to be this. So that is contrary to how God made
You don't
us.
want to be what God made you as. You now can, yeah, we now
And-
can worship some false notion of what you can be. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so unhealthy for children, and it's contrary to how God made us. This idea that we're neither this nor that, we're neither male nor female. And then with the critical race theory, that is so damaging for children to even, children don't care. They're not even paying attention to that. Little children, you know the song from South Pacific, you have to be carefully taught. And that's little children, they don't pay attention to who's white, who's black. And I'll say, having lived in New York City, having ridden the New York City subways for years, and especially the 2 years I lived there, we were all fine until all of this media buzz about black and white. I lived in a Latino neighborhood. I rode the subways for hours at a time. We were all coexisting perfectly
Yes, we
well.
were. Yes, we were.
Until the media decided that there's something wrong here and
Yep.
it has to be fixed with indoctrination in the schools.
And we know how totalitarian governments back then controlled the media too. So the lesson here, just my comment, and then I'll ask you one last question at a higher level. But what I love about your song and this aria technically, but to this we've come, is the great lesson. These same brutal, bullyish, we heard that from our, we're gonna talk about that bullying with our guest coming up about a lawsuit. But these same bullying tactics that were used and failed so miserably back then are now being repeated now. And I'm hoping a song like this one can make people aware that that this is not new. This is not progressive. This is old communist thuggery, right?
Yes, the tactics are repeated, as we've heard the woman from North Korea saying these are the same tactics. People from communist regimes have said these are the same things. But the problem, especially in Rhode Island, is a complacency when people in this consensus trance, is what I call it. Everything's fine. They're doing this to keep us safe. The masks to keep us safe. They're completely hypnotized. Hitler had the radio. The current regime has the television, which is much more powerful.
All right, let's talk about they, because that's another line. Who are these dark archangels? Who are these elite? Who are these people that think they know best and think they have the right to tell us what we can do or not do, whether we can pray to God or we must pray to men, whether we can have the world withheld from us or not, whether we can have the choices we want. Who are these dark archangels? You mentioned critical race theory a minute ago. You've seen the parent uprisings in this state. You've seen them from Loudoun County last night and from other parts of the country. And in the song we ask, will these dark archangels be conquered? Will they be doomed? Do you get the sense, Claire, that like they did in the 40s and 50s in the Eastern Bloc and the fascist governments in Europe and Asia, that the leftists and the fascists and the Marxists in this country are overplaying their hands, and indeed they will be conquered and doomed? What is your sense?
Only if we stand up and stop being complacent. Now, the pastor in Canada, Artur Pawlowski,
Yes.
said that, you know, he lived through the Polish communist regime, and then he went to Canada. He said it's worse now, because you used the word globalists. It's because it's all over the world. It's not contained in, let's say, Poland. And he said there were 36 million people there, and they finally said enough is enough. We must do that now. We must be like the Tony Romans of his California restaurant, that when I went on New Year's Eve just to give some money to restaurants to support them, I said, you need to band together and to get lawyers. But Tony Robbins says, no, not lawyers. You just say, my restaurant is open. We're not dealing with your mandates. And we Rhode Islanders and Americans must stand up, as the Pastor Pawlowski did, as Tony Roman, the restaurateur, did. We must do
And
that.
just like those parents did in Loudoun County, they said the national anthem, even though the head of the council said, no national anthem. They said it anyway. They defied these dark archangels, and we need to do the same. I mean, that's the lesson of how victory was achieved, right, in the 1940s and 50s. And that's the secret to how we're going to win out now. Final word to you, Claire.
Yes, well, I'm part Greek, and on October 28th, the Greeks, when Mussolini came and said, you know, if we can occupy, we'll take good care of you. And the Greeks said, ochi, no. And my Greek great-grandmother died of poison mushroom because the communists made food unavailable. And she died because out of desperation, she ate a poison mushroom. We must say, ochi, nein, basta, no. And we have to do that with all these mandates and not go by, oh, they're keeping us safe. No, they're not.
Claire Stottmuller, we're proud to have you as a Rhode Island resident. You can see the Arias for Freedom. Go to oceanstatecurrent.com. You can see the abridged version, the one we just played for you, all the full length 7.5-minute version down here. I also want to promote our website where people can learn more about you, and they can go to, I love the name, bravasoprano.com, where they can read more about you, see more of your performances, reviews. I was looking at the website. It's a beautiful website, Brava, B-R-A-V-A, soprano.com. What else are they going to find there, Claire? Quickly, we got about 20 seconds.
Snippets of other performances and photos, fun photos with different conductors and such. And by the way, I did meet Giancarlo Menotti in Italy when I was singing in Italy. I forgot to tell you that some years ago. Not this piece, a different piece. So yeah, it's a big piece, so we'll continue to explore it.
All right. Yeah, Claire, we're going to go through more of the lines of the full aria in future shows. We're going to have you back regularly. Claire Stottmuller, thanks again for joining us in the Dugout.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Now, speaking of Sheldon Whitehouse, as we were just moments ago, one of his constant calls is complaints against dark money. Well, he doesn't seem to care when dark money funds causes on the left, but he cares a lot when dark money, and it's not even dark money, it's legally allowed money, but as he calls it, funds causes on the right. In Rhode Island, many years ago, our own Justin Katz, in his capacity as a local resident in Tiverton, spoke out against a local referenda that the liberal rep from that town didn't like, that our Justin Katz weighed in on that. So he went to the General Assembly and had a law passed that even if you're a nonprofit organization, and by the way, it wasn't our organization that was organizing the resistance to this local referenda. It was an individual who worked for us. But the perception was, ooh, all these evil Koch brothers and dark money funded right-wing groups must be behind this effort to beat this referenda. So they created a law, I think it was back in 2013, 2014, that said if organizations weigh in, even on referenda, they would have to disclose their donors. Now, there's been a constant fight, freedom of speech, invasion of donor privacy. The left is trying to expose and dox, if you would, right-wing donors. They've been trying to do it for years and years and years, and Rhode Island has put something to that effect into law. So joining us today is Daniel Sewer, and a litigation attorney for the Liberty Justice Center, and Clay Johnson, chairman of the Gaspee Project, a local-based political advocacy organization in Rhode Island. Daniel, you and another plaintiff, Clay Johnson and Gaspee, another plaintiff, said this is not fair. Explain the lawsuit you filed with Gaspee Project as a plaintiff just last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having us on the show.
First of all, thanks for your hat. What is your cap, by the way?
It's a Cabela's hat. I've got 2 boys who are in Cub Scouts, so we are constantly spending too much money getting ready for camping trips and fishing outings.
And Clay Johnson, welcome back to In the Dugout. Not only do you have a cap, what is your cap?
Franklin Barbecue in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, but you're in the dugout too.
I'm in.
Look
I'm
at
at the
you.
other end.
That's the greatest guests we've ever had as far as working in the dugout. We're both in the dugout. Okay, Dan, you got to get with it, Daniel. All right, back to you.
I'm in the
Back
law
to you.
library, so that's where the lawyer should be.
All right, tell
Yeah.
it. Yeah, good for you. Tell us about the lawsuit.
Yeah, so these books behind me would tell you the First Amendment protects every American's right to join with your neighbors and friends and people who share your beliefs in order to advocate on important issues in your community. That's fundamental to who we are as a free people in a free society. And one aspect of that is recognizing that the issues we talk about are sometimes controversial. Sometimes the issues we care about, they prompt disagreements in our community. And privacy is an important tool to protect the ability of people to come together and talk about controversial things. Because one sad aspect of what we've seen, especially in the last few years in our politics, is that people will retaliate against other people based just on their political views. They'll go after your job,
You know,
they'll go after your company.
You're so right about that, because our center is a 501c3. It's my job to take the arrows, right, to take the hits. But for our donors, they're donating purposely behind the scene. And isn't it the left's, and then we'll get to Clay here in a second, but isn't it the left's goal, like I mentioned earlier, to really they're trying to shut down donations to center-right groups like ours, because we're effective and because they do want to harass our donors and stop those donations.
No, you're right, Mike. Fundamentally, this is about protecting the right of people to band together and speak up on issues. We have seen a proven track record that people use this information to bully other people, right? If you want to put one word on how this information gets used, it's about bullying people.
Right.
It's about silencing people. It's about shutting down free speech, because privacy creates the space to have actual conversations focused on ideas rather than inquisition after people because they hold unpopular views.
That's
The
the
whole point of
cancel
this film is to
culture.
protect people with unpopular views.
Sadly, that's the cancel culture of today, the doxing. Clay Johnson, chairman of the Gaspee Project. We had a real life example of this. Now, it was for a political electioneering purpose, which is different than, and we'll get into these nuances in a second. But you remember years ago, it was exposed somebody who donated to a Gaspee Project, one of your flyers that went out during an election, and the Democrat Party and the left in this state went after this gentleman, one of the great philanthropists in our state. We won't mention his name, but I'm sure you remember that incident.
I do, yeah. They tried to dox him. They tried to tarnish his good name. You know, all we want to do is have a voice at the table, and we want to get involved in issues. We're an issue advocacy group. We want to get involved in referendums. We want to get involved in elections. And apparently they have a problem with us having a voice. So they want to shut it down. And part of the challenge with this law is we have to disclose enough information that they can go after people. They can cause hardship. We had the Board of Elections was given a completely gratuitous complaint against us. We had the U.S. Postal Service sicked on us. And, you know, if they would have their way, they would have our full donor list and they would go after everybody. And we view these donor lists as being very private.
And Daniel, from a legal perspective, and I'm talking when I say legal, Supreme Court precedent, I should say, perspective, isn't there a fundamental difference between transparency for government and other public offices, a difference between transparency in government and privacy for private enterprises? They're not the same thing, right?
That's absolutely right, Mike. The government, how they're spending our taxpayer dollars, how they're using the authority that we entrust them as having power over us, that's what should be transparent. What we do in our private lives with our money, with our friends and neighbors, that is not the government's business. That is fundamental to who we are as a free society. We don't have to report to the government every time we decide to support a charity.
That's right.
Right. I think the easy thing to ask here is if you were on the left and the government said anybody who donates to Planned Parenthood or anybody who donates to the Sierra Club, they have to disclose a full list of all the people who give money to those organizations. How would you feel about that? Right? It's a total double standard that they just go after conservatives and they only want to know because they want to bully people.
Clay, can you name for us another practical consideration? Now, we talked about somebody getting doxxed for a legitimate electioneering. Yeah, if you're donating to a cause for public office, that kind of is a gray area. But yeah, okay, we're okay with donating to campaigns since that's a public office and the public needs to know whether there's some quid pro quo deal there with a donor. But from a referendum, some other practical example, what kind of things would an organization like Gaspee Project have to have second thoughts about doing out of fear of having donors exposed?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we have fear about it. Our full board is public information, and they've certainly faced the wrath of the other side.
Yeah.
We've seen
government has gone after them, the tax department. Yeah,
absolutely. Sales tax, income tax, that we've had businesses audited and regulators sent in. It's really insane, and you can't tie all this together, but it certainly seems awfully coincidental. You know, we're in the dugout. They throw high and inside, right? These are bean balls, and they're going for the head. And you got to ask yourself, what are they afraid of? You know, we're a minority in this state. We have views. We just want them to be heard. We know they're not going to get voted on. Yeah. But we have the right to say it, and we think that should be part of the discussion here, and that's why we want the lawyers to go in and fight for our rights.
All right, speaking of lawyers fighting, now the reason we're bringing this up now is just a short time ago, there were actual oral arguments in this case that was filed in Rhode Island. Daniel, I know you presented those oral arguments in the case, and I know it probably echoes a lot of what you just said to us, but can you just give us a sense of how you felt the arguments went in court just about a week or so ago?
Yeah, Mike, we were in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, which is the regional court that covers Rhode Island and other New England states. And we had 3 judges. And I think we had a really good, honest conversation with the bench, with the panel, about the many ways that this law infringes on First Amendment rights. I'll give you another example. Not only do you have to disclose your donors to the Board of Elections, you actually have to say on the advertisement,
right.
You know, my name's Daniel Sir, I approve this message, and my top 5 donors are, you know, Mike and Clay and B, C, and D, right? And so the government is forcing me on an advertisement that I'm paying for to say words the government is mandating. That's compelled speech. The First Amendment says not only that we have a right to free speech, but we also have a right not to speak, that the government can't force us to say things we don't want to say and we don't believe. And I think the panel was really struggling with how to square what they might see as good policy with this fundamental principle of the First Amendment that the government can't tell us what to say.
Yeah. Or criticize us if we say the wrong thing. Clay, now, you raise money for Gaspee Project. I raise money for our center. And I can imagine, and I hear it all the time, and I'm sure you do too. When a donor says, they often say, if I donate, is my name going to be out there? Right. I mean, we donors know this is real, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we have to let them know what the law is so that they can make their decisions on how they want their donation dealt with. So, I mean, the real issue here is I don't have a vote. They're donating to Gaspee not to buy a vote from me. They're donating to Gaspee to get their message out, because they sympathize with things we stand for and they help shape what we stand for. So, these are sort of classically American ideas that how can I express my standing on a soapbox on the street corner saying what I want to say. Apparently there are thresholds you cross and you cause all kinds of trouble. Yet the local newspaper can put an endorsement on their front page and not face any kind of problem.
Or an editorial, or something like that. And it's sad to think that in Rhode Island, this all started because of a petulant lawmaker, Jay Edwards, we'll name him, we're not afraid to name him, out of Tiverton, who was upset that a local person fought openly against a referendum. All right, last question, one more question each, our time's running short here. Daniel, I know you've communicated, that with the Attorney General's office defending the current law, maybe it's the insider status of the judiciary in this state, whatever it is, that our chances of winning here even though you thought the judges understood the arguments you were making, but still our chances are winning may be remote in this court, in this state. But you made it clear that even a loss at this circuit court could eventually lead to a victory at the Supreme Court. So a loss is not the end of the game, is it?
No, we're going all the way to the Supreme Court in this case. In fact, in the next week or so, we expect the U.S. Supreme Court to rule on an important case from California dealing with our friends at Americans for Prosperity. The California Attorney General was forcing them to turn over their donor list. I think it's really interesting in that case. You look at the parties that filed what are called amicus briefs, or briefs supporting one side. There were a number of major organizations on the left, LGBTQ advocacy groups, environmental advocacy groups, racial justice advocacy groups, who also sometimes support unpopular positions. And they came in support of donor privacy, because all of us, regardless of our political beliefs, all of us benefit from the protections of the First Amendment and free speech. And so we're really hopeful of a win in that case will lay the groundwork for an even bigger win in our case.
Okay, and that's the beauty of these courts, is you don't have to win here. Clay, the final word goes to you as one of the plaintiffs in the state. Your thoughts on where this is headed?
Well, I'll tell you, if there's no fear of disclosures, what I would ask is that Senator Whitehouse, who seems to have a problem with us and a problem with other conservative groups, disclose all the names for his beach club, his whites only beach club in Rhode Island. There's a problem with disclosure, and he knows it, right? So I think he should apply the same rules to everybody.
What a great point. And of course they shouldn't disclose the names of that private beach club. It's a private beach club, and that goes to our point, privacy for private entities, just like Gaspee Project. If we're not dealing in electioneering, if we're only dealing in policy or only dealing in policy referenda, we should have that same privacy that Sheldon Whitehouse wants for his beach club members. What a great point you made right there. All right, Daniel, I will give you, since it's a legal case, anything else you want to add, or we cover it all?
We care about the First Amendment. Thank you guys for caring about the First Amendment. It's important for all of us.
Daniel
Keep fighting for us, Dan.
All right, Daniel Searle, Liberty Justice Center, Clay Johnson, the Gaspee Project. Thank you for being in the dugout with me today. We'll talk to you soon as this case develops. Good day.
Sounds good.
Wow, folks. To this we've come. This world, this country is upside down. Everything is upside down. Everything, they want to upend everything we traditionally believed, had faith in, and they want us to have faith in these crazy, illogical, hypocritical, thuggish, and racist dark archangels, as the song to this we've come says. We'll have more on all these topics in the coming days. Stay with us on In the Dugout, the only place you're hearing the truth on many issues. Tomorrow, Larry the Liberty Guy, challenger to David Cicilline, a Black American himself, Alan Waters, on Cicilline's disgraceful backing of the hypocritical Sheldon Whitehouse, and of course, Dr. Andrew Boston. For In the Dugout, we'll see you at tomorrow's game. Mike Stenhouse out.